this time last night, we were reading between the lines of Diddy's lawyer's decision and Diddy's decision not to call any witnesses. Was it possible that he just couldn't find any who could help him? Or was it possible he thought he didn't need any help, that the government just hadn't done the job? But 24 hours later, after a court session that we fully expected would be a total snore, something happened that lit up the headlines, and we kind of got our answer as to whether the prosecutors have their guy. They told the judge that they're dropping a few allegations that the jury is going to have to sort through in deliberations. See if you can spot the headline in this letter that they sent to the judge. Quote, "The government understands the court's desire for streamlined jury instructions. With that in mind, the government has removed instructions from the charge relating to 1, attempted kidnapping under both California and New York law. 2, attempted arson under California law. And 3, aiding and abetting sex trafficking. The government is no longer planning to proceed on these theories of liability, so instructions are no longer necessary," end quote. Did you see it? Did you see it? Because it sure sounds like the government has given up on a few charges. It sounds like it. But they're not really. Because attempted kidnapping is not the same as kidnapping. And attempted arson is not the same as arson. And the way I see it, the feds aren't backing down on the more serious charges, kidnapping and arson. They're just backing off on the attempted versions. And committing the crime is way more serious than attempting to commit the crime, especially when you're counting the predicate acts needed to prove racketeering. And kidnapping and arson are among them. And yes, I know that your feeds were absolutely filled with the news today that the feds were dropping arson and kidnapping from their case. The government's case against Diddy was not collapsing. 6 weeks, 34 witnesses, it's not collapsing. I'm here to tell you, if someone said it was collapsing and that they're dropping that stuff, that's poppycock, in the words of Colonel Potter. The feds really aren't giving an inch here, nor have any of their facts or their allegations gone away. In a RICO case, they need to prove only 2 predicate crimes over a 10-year period. Any 2 from the RICO list of like 37-ish. Arson and kidnapping are on that list. And the feds have a lot of evidence that those 2 crimes happened. For example, the alleged kidnapping of Diddy's ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, and the alleged kidnapping of his former assistant, Capricorn Clark. Plenty of evidence, plenty of witness testimony. They also had evidence of alleged arson on Kid Cudi's Porsche. It's for this crazy reason I called Jesse Weber this morning at, 8 or so, woke him up, and why the 2 of us have been scratching our heads all day long. Jesse, of course, is an attorney. He's anchor for Law and Crime Network and a legal analyst here at NewsNation. Everybody lost their collective minds and went bananas today. Jesse, how do you see it?
Well, first of all, the fact that you think you woke me up at 8 o'clock, shocker. I've been up at 5:30 for this case every day. No, look, you're 100% right, because when I saw the headlines, everyone's like, oh my gosh, the prosecution's case is weak. They're dropping arson, they're dropping kidnapping. Go back to the indictment. You're 100% right. Not only was he, yes, charged with attempted kidnapping or attempted arson, he's also charged, like you said, with arson, kidnapping, but conspiracy to commit arson, aiding and abetting arson, aiding and abetting kidnapping. These are all theories by which the jury could conclude that the prosecution fulfilled the elements of that predicate crime. And you're right, the prosecution only needs to prove 2. This is what's going on here. Racketeering conspiracy, the top charge here, potentially life in prison, is a very, very complicated charge. I've been talking about it for the last 6 weeks. People still don't even know what I'm talking about. So the jury instructions need to be as clear as possible. That's what they did. They made it simpler for the jury to ultimately convict him of this charge. Now, I'm still 50-50 on whether or not they've proven it, but they've definitely made it easier come tomorrow, those closing arguments.
So nobody should think for a minute that kidnapping and arson have been yanked from the case against Diddy.
We will see in closing arguments tomorrow, but I would highly, highly doubt that. Why? they spend so much time focusing on it. They called Kid Cudi. They called a fire investigator. They called Capricorn Clark about allegedly being kidnapped by Sean Combs and brought to Kid Cudi's home while at gunpoint, that she was taken to this abandoned building and given lie detector tests. Kid Cudi's testimony, I will say, is some of the most compelling testimony we've heard because he really doesn't have a dog in this fight. So to abandon that, two of the top predicate charges, I think would be a major mistake, and I don't see them doing it. I think they're doubling down on a charge that they've spent the majority of their case trying to prove.
Yeah, and also the Uncle Paulie, part of the kidnapping allegation in that abandoned warehouse. That was all very Sopranos. One of my experts that I turned to, who's involved in a massive sex trafficking case with the Southern District of New York, said to me, "I see no other way to interpret it other than the way you have. The government will be very precise in their language. It is only the attempted portion they're walking away from because they have it actually." They can keep it simple. So, and that's just one of the experts I conferred with today. So let's talk about all the predicate acts, because I said before, I think I counted 37. Sometimes it's different for state and federal, but there are so many potential predicate acts that they can just pick and choose from in order to get to prove racketeering. And on my list, assault, forced labor, bribery, distribution of a controlled substance, extortion, kidnapping, witness tampering, dealing in obscene matter, obstruction of justice, slavery, sex trafficking, drug trafficking. That's not even all of them. Do you think that they're going to try to highlight most or many of those, or just stick with kidnapping and arson?
I think they're going to list every one of them. Why? Because they also have to establish a racketeering conspiracy that Sean Combs operated a criminal enterprise, that he used his bodyguards and assistants to engage in a pattern of illegal activity for a period of time and tried to cover it up. The more they can make the argument, the more they can convince the jury that he was essentially a mafia boss, of course they're going to include everything. Now, I will tell you, there are certain underlying predicate crimes that I think are stronger than the others. Bribery, the whole testimony from Eddie Garcia, who had worked at the Intercontinental Hotel and said that he was paid $100,000 that he split with two other people to hand over the videotape to Sean Combs, was arguably some of the strongest testimony we've heard. If you talk about the narcotics that was found at Sean Combs' properties, and ultimately when he was arrested, if you're talking about possession, maybe with the intent to distribute, and the idea that he used drugs not only during these sexual episodes, but just had them on his person, I think they have a strong case there. Sex trafficking, we can go into that. Forced labor, the idea that you have a number of, more specifically, Mia, who was this former assistant who says that she was sexually assaulted by Sean Combs as his assistant, that these assistants were forced to do things that went above and beyond. I think that they make a strong argument, but at the same time, the defense has done an incredible job at cross-examining these key witnesses and trying to say, even if you take everything as true, there is no racketeering conspiracy. There is no sex trafficking afoot. He's a bad guy, but he didn't commit a federal crime like that.
Yeah, I mean, I read those instructions today, the suggestions from the government, and I thought, wow, they're nailing it, saying, hey, you don't have to have somebody who never wants to do something. They may have been paid. They may have been happy working there, and it turned bad. They may have been happily in love and happily having sex, and it turned bad. So once they get through that, I think it'll be very different for these jurors if they do have any doubts, you know.
Well, I'll say real quick.
Did you have a last
the transportation to engage in prostitution charges are the easiest path to conviction. And by the way, it got a lot easier for the prosecution today, because now they don't have to prove that the people who were transported were prostitutes. All they have to prove is men were transported and a sex act occurred, a commercial sex act. That is a big win for the prosecution, because the defense was saying, oh, these people weren't prostitutes. Not anymore. They can't make that argument.
Right. Jesse, it's such an incredible case, just as a study, you know. I got to have you back. Thank you for this. I appreciate it.
You got it. Good talking to you today.
And thanks for the early phone call, too. All right, folks, you have probably heard a lot of people on social media saying that this is just an assault case. This is not a sex trafficking case. An assault where Diddy was caught red-handed on camera beating Cassie Ventura in a hotel hallway. Case closed, right? But the statute of limitations has long passed to bring assault, so no case. Sex trafficking, on the other hand, is very much in play. And lest you think that women have to be handcuffed in a van and strapped to a mattress to make money for their kingpin in order to be guilty of sex trafficking, think again. The law says that that kingpin doesn't even need to be paid a penny to be guilty of sex trafficking. And there's nobody who knows this more than my next guest. Thomas Volscho is an investigative journalist and professor of sociology at City University in New York. He wrote a fantastic paper clearly outlining the difference between commercial sex trafficking and elite sex trafficking, both of them being very, very illegal. And it's a difference that could make or break the case against Diddy. Thomas, great to have you here. Thank you so much. Can you explain for any folks out there who do not believe that this is sex trafficking at all, because, again, you don't have the chain to the mattress piece, can you explain what elite sex trafficking is?
Sure. So many people believe, like, as you said, that sex trafficking must involve somebody being coercively chained to a radiator. But in the paper, what I do is I argue, using Epstein and the case of Peter Nygard, that there's also elite sex trafficking, which can involve, and in this case, a highly wealthy individual who uses the services of other people to procure and groom victims and bring them to the head of the organization for sexual exploitation.
Yeah, and so the government said in its recommendations for the jury instructions today, please tell the jury, judge, that they need to understand that the kingpin doesn't even need to make a penny. It doesn't have to be about a financial transaction. He could just be benefiting from the sex. Is that what you think has some people hung up on why this is sex trafficking?
Yeah, because a lot of it, like if you look at Epstein, for instance, what he did was he had another business, which was he was a financial consultant to advise wealthy people on their tax situations, and that's how he earned his money. And what he would do is he would take his money that he was earning from that, and he would use it and other resources and hire people to procure, obtain, select victims, access and isolate them on his properties for his own sexual gratification, and allegedly sometimes for the sexual gratification of other people. Peter Nygard apparently did the same thing. Now, the difference with Peter Nygard is that Mr. Nygard is charged by the Southern District of New York with a RICO case in addition to sex trafficking, very similar to Mr. Combs.
Yeah. So one of the things that the government made clear today was that the victims can be paid and still be trafficked, which I thought was interesting because I think a lot of people think if you're being trafficked, you're a sex slave. So can you just sort of clear that up for, you know, in the different cases that you've looked at, paper that you've done, how it can be that a jury needs to get their head around that a sex trafficked victim can actually be on the payroll?
Right. So the a lot of times what happens is the victim vulnerability profile is very important. So in this circumstance, with Mr. Combs allegedly and like Mr. Nygard and Mr. Epstein, they're all misters, right? What they do is they pose as gatekeepers to opportunities like fashion, modeling, music, entertainment, acting. And so they sort of dangle that as a lure to bring people into their enterprises. But they also prey on the financially vulnerable simply because they're financially vulnerable. And so the exchange of money, that does not necessarily, that has nothing to do with whether or not you're being trafficked. Even the law recognizes that. And in some cases, the money becomes, a sense of a source of financial dependency of the victim. It's a hush money payment so that the victim doesn't disclose the abuse to the authorities or to any other people. So that's a very good overview of sort of like why money and rewards and opportunities necessarily don't matter under the law.
It's super fascinating, and I think that, after R. Kelly and Nygard hasn't gone to trial yet in the Southern District. He's got a couple of cases up in Canada first. And by the way, I've got a whole podcast at Drop Dead Serious about Peter Nygard, who happened to be Uncle Peter to me. Ugh. He wasn't my uncle, but he was my best friend's uncle, so I grew up with him. And so I was fascinated in that case, still am. And Tom Volscho, thank you so much for this, because I think it's something more people are starting to learn about, more people are starting to understand, but not everybody. And maybe the Diddy case will help that. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
You too. Okay, folks, court gets underway tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern. The government begins presenting its closing at 10. They get 4 hours. But the defense decided that they wanted to save theirs for Friday so that they wouldn't be broken up. Because, you know, 4 hours and 4 hours plus a lunch break and a couple morning breaks, the day's not long enough. But we are going to have full recaps on both of the closings on our show, both Thursday and Friday. So don't miss it.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.